So I am officially selling my Porsche 911 GTS, and I couldn't be more excited. Let me get it out of the way in the beginning and say I'm not selling this car because I don't enjoy it. Actually, quite the opposite. I literally love this car. I've driven a lot of cars. I've been in a lot of cars in the past few years, and this is by far my favorite. The handling on this car, the way that it looks, the aggressive lines, the head turns that I get. I have mine all blacked out. I mean, it's literally the most favorite car I've ever owned in my entire life, and it has never given me any problems whatsoever. I will probably always be a Porsche guy in the future. So we know that it's not because I don't like it, and it's also not because of the monthly payments or the cost of it. Our company generates like almost 1,000 times a month my monthly payment for that car. So we could easily afford it, and I've already paid a lot of it off through the financing company that I worked with. So the question remains, why am I getting rid of it if I love it and I can easily afford it? And in order to answer that question, I first need to take you back to why I got the car in the first place. So I started my online journey in 2018, and for the next few years up until 2020, I never owned a car. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense for me to own one. When I first started the online journey, the cost of a car actually was significant compared to my monthly income. So it didn't make sense financially back then. And then when it started making sense financially, instead of like being tied down to having a car, I decided instead to start traveling. So I lived in South America for a while. I lived in Europe for a while. I traveled across the United States, and I finally kind of settled myself in San Diego. And the nice thing about San Diego is that there's Uber everywhere, so I could Uber almost no problem. And I really wasn't like leaving my house a whole lot, because that was also when, that big thing that happened in 2020. So that was also going on. So like I was also not really leaving my house. So all of that added up to it really not making sense to me to own a car. On top of that, I lived with 3 other guys, and they owned cars. So if I ever had to go anywhere, I could just ride with them places, and we could go no problem. So I just was like, hey, I don't need a car. It doesn't make sense. And I never purchased one. But near the end of 2020, I would say like August, September of 2020, I started looking at purchasing a car. And I think the main reason I looked at purchasing a car was because I did want to flex. I'm not afraid. I'm a very honest person inside of here. And I think flex is not exactly the word that I would use, but that's the word that probably people that are watching this video would use. But I did want to kind of show the world like, hey, I'm doing well, right? I kind of wanted to almost rub it in the faces of people that thought that I, wasn't going to do this. I should have gone to law school, all of my whole backstory. I kind of wanted to rub in their face a little bit. And so I ended up looking at what are some of the best cars to own and drive and what hold their value the best. And long story short, I test drove 15 to 20 different cars, a McLaren, a Ferrari 458, I did them all. And I ended up landing on a Porsche 911 GTS, mainly because of all the things I told you previously. It's like the best handling car I've ever had. The value is unbelievable. It holds its value. It can be a really aggressive sports car, but at the same time, a great daily driver. Like I would try to sit down in a Ferrari or McLaren, and the seats were literally too tight for my lats. And I know that's maybe the douchiest statement I've ever said in this YouTube video or this YouTube channel, but it was true. The seats were cutting into my back. It wasn't wide enough for my back. And the Porsche was a dream to drive on a daily basis. And also everywhere where I was test driving these cars, like Ferraris, McLarens, I just drove an Aston Martin DB11, the salespeople would treat me like I was a child, and they wouldn't let me really enjoy the car. And they wouldn't, I think they kind of thought that I was maybe doing it for a YouTube video, or I was doing it just for fun, and I didn't have purchasing power. At the Porsche dealership, the guy, we get in the car and we're coming up to the interstate, and he's like, all right, this thing handles amazingly on turns. So what I want you to do, throw it in Sports Plus and gas it while you're going around this jug handle onto the ramp. And I was in a Porsche Boxster in San Diego with the convertible drop top. So I dropped the roof down, and I was sold immediately. It was the most amazing experience. And that goes to show you how nice it is to have a good salesperson. That was one of the main reasons I bought it. And so I ended up buying the Porsche 911, and I've driven it for the past few years and have loved it. But the reason that I originally got it was really just because I wanted to kind of flex and show off a little bit in today's, day and age. And for some reason, people think that when you have flashy things or you have a lot of followers online, that equals success. So, I didn't get it for myself or for utility purposes. I just got it because I thought that other people would see me as successful. But as the years have gone on, I essentially used it less and less and less and less. And I also cared less and less and less about what other people think, to the point now where, I'm not saying that I never care about what other people think, but I'm very secure in who I am and the things that I want out of life. And I have my priorities very, very straight. I'm no longer really I don't spend a lot of my time on social media because I just like a comparison game. So I removed a lot of these influences that were causing me to want to have the car and drive the car. And then I started kind of focusing more on my business, and I started focusing more and aligning like what my real priorities were in life and what brought me happiness. And although every time I drove the car, it did bring me happiness, I was driving the car less and less and less. And because, I could afford it, I just kept on to it. And I probably drive the car once a month in the past year. And then I got my pilot's license and I bought a plane. And then literally the only time I ever drove the car was to drive it to my airport in order to fly my plane to go somewhere. So like literally I would just fly to the airport and then I would leave it there for 3 to 5 days as my girlfriend and I went on a trip somewhere. And so it started like kind of talking in the back of my brain about like why I maybe should think about selling or why I don't need it. And so I started considering it, I think like midway through last year. And then I actually read Naval Ravikant's book, and he pretty much talks about leverage and making things simple in your life, et cetera, et cetera. And so I started applying that even more to my life, even though I thought it was pretty simple. And I realized that I was kind of falling into this sunk cost fallacy where I had already bought the car, so I was justifying why I still needed it, but in reality, I didn't need the car at all. And that was when it's funny how the universe works, and this is gonna tie it up for you here. That was when someone actually, in my parking garage, I hadn't driven my car for 30 days, someone literally reversed their car into my car, parked in the parking garage after I hadn't driven it, right? And so I was very grateful that he left me a note, and so I came down like 3 weeks later and saw that my car had a dent in the front of it. It wasn't like a huge dent, but it was a dent. And so I was like, great, now I got the car I was already thinking about selling. Now it has a dent. So I took it to the shop, and they had to work on it in the shop, and it was in the shop for I think like 20 days. And while it was in the shop, I literally just Ubered everywhere, and I was like free from the sunk cost fallacy. I was free from the burden of like, oh, I have this car, let me drive it here. And I just Ubered everywhere, and I Ubered to dinners, and then I would Uber to my hangar to go there. And I like to travel nicely, so I would do Uber Black, so it would be a little bit more expensive. And, for me to go to my hangar, it was like $70 on Uber Black and then $70 back whenever I come home. So like $140 round trip. But what I was starting to really realize is that I never had to worry about my car again. It was actually faster for me to order an Uber from my condo and then go to the lobby and it's already there than for me to go into my car, the garage, drive it out of the garage, et cetera, et cetera. So it was more convenient and there was no parking. I didn't deal with valet. And in Miami, when you pull up to a spot, the valet is already $20. And then if you want to be the big baller that I like to think that I am, I would park my car. I would have them park it out front. They would look at me, they'd look at my girlfriend. They'd be like, oh, you probably want to park out front, don't you? I'm like, well, how much is that? And he's like, it's $60. I'm like, great. So now I'm spending 2 times the cost of an Uber Black to get to the restaurant just to keep my car out front, right? So all of these things kind of accumulated in the fact that I just don't need this car anymore. And I did the math, and I think for my car and my insurance, I'm spending around $1,100, $1,200 a month. And then on top of that, my parking spots in where I live in Miami, people are selling their parking spots in their building for like $300 to $400 a month. So I'm opportunity cost losing another $400 a month. We'll just say $300 to make it easy. So let's say it's $1,100 for car insurance, then another $300 for parking spot that I could be making, then another, we'll just say $100 on top of it for gas and all the other stuff. So it's like $1,500 a month that I'm losing, quote unquote, by holding on to this car. Once again, the money is not the main reason I have it, but that also got my kind of head turning. And so finally, I just decided like 2 weeks ago, I finally got my car back again. And I just never drove it after I got it back from the mechanic shop. And now I'm like into this groove of just never having to drive my car and Ubering everywhere. And sometimes the Ubers are expensive. I've taken an Uber from like Miami to North Fort Lauderdale before, and that was expensive. I've even Ubered one time when I was in Nashville. I was grounded. There was no flights because of a certain airline I won't say on here. But I needed to get back the next day. So I Ubered from Nashville to the Panhandle of Florida, which was like a 8-hour drive, I Ubered that as well. You know what I mean? And I was like, he had Wi-Fi, or I used a hotspot, but he had a plug in the back, so I just worked the entire time. And I was like, this is the most amazing thing in the world. And you think about the world that we live in today, you know, where you have the ability to literally have a private driver, especially if it's an Uber Black. Oh, Uber Black will wait up to 15 minutes for you after they arrive, unlike Uber X. Another reason why to travel Uber Black. A private driver at your fingertips for like 1/100th of what their salary would have to be to keep them on a monthly basis, literally in just a few minutes at your front door to drive you anywhere that you wanted to, as far as 8 hours away and as close as 5 minutes away, right? So with all that being said, as 2023 comes around, you know, one of the things that I told my company was that the two keywords, the two themes of this year are leverage and simplicity, right? And I am a firm believer that, you know, you obviously are the leader of your company, but your actions lead the company. So I couldn't be like, oh, we need to keep things simple, and here I am driving around this Porsche that I don't need, or even owning the Porsche that I don't need. So as of right now, my girlfriend, literally as I'm shooting this video, the reason I shot it is taking photos of it to put it online in order to sell it. And hopefully I get back at least most of what I put inside of the car to begin with. But even if I don't, the opportunity cost of continuing to hold it when I just don't need that kind of complexity in my life, even though it's not a lot, at a certain level, you realize that you identify the things that are really important to you. And unfortunately, this is not one of them. Now, will I never have a car again? No. If I move to an area where it's required, then I probably will buy one. Or if I just, for some reason, lose sight of what I want again and I care about what other people think, I'll probably buy another one. But as of right now, I'm planning on selling it, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to do it.